Hey, okay, let's go ahead. Let's get started. Hey, everyone, thanks for joining and welcome to the Data Economics Festival hosted by the Data Economics Company. We're about to kick off our session titled Data Economic Derivative Products, a discussion on opportunities to securitize data assets. If you're joining for your first session, you can learn more by going to lydion.com/festival. That's lydion.com/festival. We can find content related to some 20+ panels on how digital data and economics intersect, as well as some fun happy hour style events like a mixology class, a golf clinic, and a live sing-along as well coming up. We're excited to bring these topics to such a broad audience and would love to hear feedback on other topics we could present to you in data economics, how digital technology impacts our world, other similar topics as well. But anyway, coming back to the session at hand, today we're joined by Nathan Yates, Jason DISPENZA, and my panelist and fellow co-host, ARKA.
Thank you.
Thank you, SIRTAJ. And I wanted to also bring up that two of our panelists are not able to attend in person because of scheduling and timing issues. But Vipin, TYAGI, and Viren were kind enough to pre-record some thoughts, and we'll be sharing them with you as well. I'm really excited to get into data economic derivatives. And I think we'll begin by asking each panelist to introduce themselves, share their background and expertise, and then spend just a few minutes sharing details about the opportunities for data-supported or data-backed securities products. And then finally, we'll wrap up with a Q&A first among the panelists and also with everyone in the audience. Therefore, I absolutely encourage those in attendance to ask questions using the chat or the Q&A buttons. We will try to get to all the questions before we wrap today. So first up, we have Nathan Yates, who will also explain a bit about what financial derivatives are, as well as data-backed or data economic derivatives. So Nathan, it's off to you.
All right, thank you very much, and welcome to my presentation. So I will now share my screen with everyone. Hold on 1 second.
See if you can share. Yeah, I just turned it on, the sharing.
Okay. All right.
There we go.
Turn that on. There we go. So now then, I'll switch to the Zoom, and we are off. So, welcome to my presentation. I am Nathan Yates, and I have a master's in economics and finance, as well as a master's degree in finance. I have experience teaching and writing about the investment industry, as well as previous work as an analyst. So, now then, move on to the next slide. Yeah. All right, so this is our first presentation, data derivative products. So this is all right. Well, it's not changing slides. Hold on 1 second. Let's have that. All right, there we go. Nothing. Let's proceed with our presentation. Sorry about that. All right. So, this is open work of state plans. You're familiar with the idea of financial derivatives, whether social options, features, structures, products, as well as financial services. There are various with hedging and speculative purposes, and there are common in investment portfolios. Whether tied to financial assets, these derivatives raise the proverbial wheels of finance. And then the economic derivatives are what we're discussing today. They have the same basic principles as financial derivatives, and hopefully they'll be useful to either hedge or de-risk a portfolio, also as speculative investments. But the difference between data derivatives and financial derivatives is that data derivatives are derive their value based on underlying data assets versus financial assets such as industries, stocks, commodities. So, outcome and value-based derivatives original common healthcare financial potential market believes this motivation to limit these derivatives to a single industry. Alright, so reason for alright that you are the portfolio manager of a new fund focused on ESG investment. You're interested in copying from new technology that should reduce national gas power emissions by up to 50%. Accelerating in traditional equity investment in the technology provider. Furthermore, there is a proposition here. This is a miracle strategy. Furthermore, has value-based appearance that is powerful the system that you invest in. The appearance for furthermore and based on the employee elections and elections at every point using the technology. The when opposed information, there are things you earn on the services. So, imagine also what will enhance the adoption of data services. Services also is a circular market possible, and the liquidity is always important. The availability across multiple industry sectors as far as valuation framework, favorable regulations, and digital marketplace and then further further effective and listing this listed and then proposals person to person and they help to customize this type of situation. So data is not users are truly in the infancy. They are using new exactly I have some future that they have untapped potential. So thank you all for listening to this session and over to ARKA and societies.
Hey, Nathan, thank you so much. Appreciate the background. And you know, so and the examples as well. You know, we have a couple other folks. Well, we can go over to Nathan in a second to talk about, you know, the work that he's doing. Sorry, I mean Jason in a second to talk about the work that he's doing as well, and what, you know, opportunities in data economic derivatives. Jason, we were talking a little bit before the call, and then I know you have some thoughts as well around, like, hey, what it is, you know, what could go into a data-backed derivative as well versus just you know, a standard derivative. So Jason, how about you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you know, your company, and then we could go from there.
Sure. Thanks, SIRTAJ, and the introduction, Nathan. My name is Jason DISPENZA. I have spent 16 years in the energy services industry and the home performance with Energy Star program world. And more recently, we're trying to figure out ways that personal data and housing data can bring money in front of healthy homes projects, energy efficiency projects in new ways that the current systems cannot. And our interest in derivatives, you know, sort of started a handful of years ago when crowd equity and crowdfunding became more commonplace in 2012. And, you know, by sort of a very dry definition, I, you know, would point out I've got degrees in chemistry and economics, and have maintained this level of economic research while doing energy services. But this interest in data-backed derivatives, you know, is still really not fully comprehended by most people today, or even those that are in the derivatives markets. The derivatives markets today are enormous. The ranges in value, you know, go from 650 trillion to 1.2 quadrillion. That's $1,200 trillion. And you know, a derivative is very simple. It's just it's a contract against the value or the performance of another asset. And so most of derivatives today are based on things that are a bit more tangible, stuff like money or bonds and government bills, other types of paper notes, securities, municipal bonds, stocks. You've got sort of miscellaneous assets, you know, private and commercial real estates and so forth. And underneath that entire quadrillion-dollar wedge doesn't yet really fit a category of citizen data. And, you know, what our interest is in sort of some of the last frontiers of data that hasn't quite been stolen from us yet. I won't call out big tech names, but by and large, the big data industry operates off of your data is their revenue cycle. It is their product. It is their profit. And the derivatives markets, you know, a derivative is by definition a contract between two parties that adjusts or that pays or executes based on the performance of a different asset, a reference asset. And your social data isn't yours. It's not, you are not in a contract to swap it with anyone. And we, in the Energy Star space, we go into homes and businesses, but we'll focus on homes for the most part to say, we collect thousands of data points about your house and about the appliances of your house, about how the house is constructed. Sometimes devices can be left behind to meter what you're doing in your house, count the particles in the air, count the submetering electrons consumed by appliances and so forth. And there's a ton of data. By and large, that data gets you pre-approved for a rebate, and then it's sort of locked or evaporated and not really done much more with. So we see that there is this sort of new ocean of data that we haven't lost as citizens or as homeowners yet, or as some other realms of data we may have or might need to reclaim some sovereignty over. So I was interested to join the panel because data-backed derivatives are a new thing. This is a new thing that DeFi, decentralized finance, big banking, big entities, you know, thousands of tiers above my experience level, can bring the power of their infrastructure, their technology, their networks, their markets to bear upon new data sets. But who's going to own those data sets is sort of my soapboxy side. You know, do we say that your grandma owns the data about her heating system, or does she not? You know, and if we have derivatives markets that trade with that assumption that a citizen's data is theirs and they propagate it, they get paid to broker it, they get paid to store it and transform it and move it for you, then data-backed derivatives become real. So I'm interested to see sort of what new asset classes can emerge that derivatives markets can then be built upon, and to see a quadrillion dollars of derivatives based off of, you know, what are today's estimates, you know, 15, 20 trillion worth of hard assets. You know, that's some pretty crazy leverage. Like, there's a ton of money in derivatives based on a very tiny amount of real assets, you know. And so if we can bring a new data set, if we can bring homeowner or project health and project insurance and construction data, you know, if we can bring that into this world, then the derivatives markets can sort of have a frenzy with it. But, you know, some of this comes down to the point of saying, well, how do you determine who owns the underlying asset? And then how do you fairly make derivatives contracts that can be executed, you know, or made legal, right? And so we can unpack a bit more of that. And, you know, like Nathan, you know, like to go back into what the definitions of derivatives are and what makes them legitimate or not. And the use cases are numerous. We can you know, fly through a couple of fun ones. We actually have a whole session with you on Friday, diving deeper into housing, and, you know, with the punchline being, you know, how do we deliver more money to a homeowner to do her project than it costs her to do the project? And we see some of that in solar already. We don't see the solar RECs from a solar system overpaying for a solar system yet, but that's just because there's one dimension of RECs. There's a solar system with one dimension. But if we look at stuff in your house, just, you know, off the top of my head, your dishwasher may have fresh water credits. It may have time of use energy credits. It may have recycled content for manufacturing credits. It may have multiple dimensions of attributes to trade. Vis-a-vis solar system, we have mandates, we have SRECs, but in some of our building change work is to see, well, how many families of data can we make sovereign? Can we have workers that already inspect it, you know, structure and give to you, so that you can choose to sell the rights from them, or you can choose to enter contracts to swap them or lease them, right? You know, who talks about leasing out the data of one thing element about their dishwasher. It's very nouveau stuff, and we're really trying to bring some of this messaging sort of down to the average Joe, average grandma level, in addition to enticing in the bankers in the derivative space to get excited about it. So anyway, that's sort of what my current set of day jobs is all about right now.
Thanks, Jason. I mean, that was fantastic. And I have so many questions for you, and so many topics I think we can explore with what you just said. But I'll hold off on that for the moment. We'll have a little bit of a Q&A later, as I discussed. But as Jason mentioned, we also have an entire session dedicated to the topics of sustainable building and data-backed derivatives and so on and so forth, that Jason is going to be hosting on Friday. So we encourage everyone to attend that. And SIRTAJ, should we check at this point of time if there are any questions from the audience?
Yeah, we have several really great questions up in the Q&A. I just took a peek a little bit earlier. I have a couple of questions myself I'd like to ask both of our panelists. So maybe we can get into those. I mentioned Orko, you mentioned at the start that we have some pre-recorded content from a couple of our colleagues, Vipin and Viren, and I think maybe we'll just save that for the end so that we while we got you guys here and we can get these questions answered. Hey, Nathan, let me start with you. I see, in the Q&A as well, you marked that there were a couple questions that you'd like to answer live. So maybe we can just start with the first one, or if there's one that you have a preference. Yeah.
All right. So the first, the second one, what are the primary customers for these types of financial instruments? And this is the institutional investor market that is the primary customer, not necessarily retail traders with a Robin Hood account, but hedge funds, pension funds, endowment funds, that type of institutional investor is a primary purchaser of this type of derivatives. And then the other one that the question that I'd like to address next is there anything about derivatives that make them risky or likely to crash the market of what happens with mortgage derivatives? And honestly, I don't think so. As a housing crash of 2007, 2008 was not necessarily the fault of the derivatives themselves. It was the fault of the mortgage companies that had loose lending standards. So I don't think that data derivatives will crash the data market of what happened, years and years ago. So I think is the important thing to remember here. All right. Were there other questions that I should answer or not?
So Taj, I don't think we can hear you.
Hey, sorry, I had muted myself. Hey, Nathan, I was saying Thank you. And Jason, I wanted to ask you as well. I know there's a couple of open questions in the Q&A poll. If you wanted to take a look and if you know, answer any one of those or get into any one of those in particular.
Fire one away. Sorry, I'm not looking at the chat at the moment.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Hey, no problem. Well, you know what? Let me ask you one of mine in that case. You know, it's something that I wanted to kind of just ask. I want to say it's a question to both of you guys. You know, when I tend to think of derivative products, I always think of like the risk reward, right? It's from my standpoint, it just helps me understand it. And you know, it's always like somebody like, hey, I have this additional risk, whether it's a price volatility or whether it's you know, some unknown or something like that. And I always want to think of like, hey, how do I, if there was some way to offset that risk, you know, provide some price stability or something else, right? So I guess I wanted to get an idea from Nathan, either from the example of healthcare for you, or Jason, maybe the example of, maybe Jason, we can go to you first. The example from like buildings, you know, what are some of the inherent risks that you see, and what are some of the potential offsets that we create with using like data-backed derivative products?
Sure. So as I had mentioned, you know, there's the effort of getting your data made digital to start with, and then there's the effort of making digital data into derivatives. So we are still very early in this
I agree with you. We're
cycle.
skipping a couple of steps here, you know, in terms of like the foundations and all of that. But you know, this is kind of like, yeah, we're definitely it's just kind of forward thinking. Like I like to think of it, and sorry for the aside here, but it's just like, you know, I know there's a lot to do, a lot to lay that foundation and get that groundwork in any one of these industries. But you know, if you know the potential of it and you know the opportunities are down the road, you know, it kind of, I don't know, I always just find it motivating and interesting.
Sure. You know, you mentioned this exposure to price movements and speculation, and that's a big chunk of derivatives markets at the moment. Like that's a pretty easy to understand derivatives contract as well. But derivatives also they help get access into difficult to trade marketplaces, right? And assets that are otherwise illiquid. And it's that area that I kind of focus on the most. You know, the decisions by your smart appliances, you know, whether you've upgraded an attribute one by one in your house, whether you have less pollution after a project versus before. These are kind of black or white things, and they're definitely hard to reach marketplaces. In fact, they're not even really existent marketplaces at the moment. So the thought of making a marketplace for them is really what Building Change is, you know, setting out to do now. In terms of trying to arbitrage the value of the public health impact of having less air pollution in your house, we've stopped at the point of just saying you should have less air pollution in your house, and asking, should you pay for it or should someone else pay for it? And what's in it for corporate America if they want to pay for it, right? Are they willing to just give you money to do it? Are they willing to buy the health benefits from you doing it? Are they willing to trade your attention to watch videos to give you money for your project? You know, there's all these different sort of flavors, but most of the time the data that we're most interested in is a bit more swap oriented. It's black or white. Either you did the options package or not. Either you got the slip and fall accident or you got the slip and fall hazard out of a house, or you didn't, right? Like, and in terms of trying to wrap that with a derivative, you kind of go a bit way more theoretical and or into a marketplace that's far more mature, right? You know, the healthcare industries have to care about the PR of buying these health credits before they can start arbitraging them, I think. So there's a bit there, and then also the digital and data-backed derivatives thing is, again, like I said, only a few years old. You know, it was only 2019 that even any court in the globe started saying that smart contracts could be legally binding. We had a couple of proto examples in 2017 and 2018 with the CME doing some stuff with cryptocurrencies. It's the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, CME. And really 2020 right now, 2021 here, we're sitting here in April. You know, the 50 biggest stocks are starting to make their way into digital asset trading, and are, you know, seeing over the counter action. And, you know, derivatives are some level of, you know, wrapping themselves again around a digital asset. So we still have to decide as a society what parts of our data deserve to be digital assets, and then how do you track who owns what isn't a derivative. But if you get sovereignty over it, if you get to own it, then you can have this derivative discussion to say, well, what attributes about it relate? What other two counterparties are interested in referencing my asset? If my asset is my house is healthier than average, well, that matters to me. That matters to my home's equity. Maybe I got money from corporate America for various reasons to like make it that way. But if I own the health improvement fact, then you can build a you know, a rather wildly speculative, theoretically speculative derivative off of that. But you know, let me let Nathan answer, and I'll try and come up with a you know, an example or two.
Well,
And I have a follow-up
ARKA
for I have a quick follow-up for Jason before we move on, if that's okay.
Yeah, please go ahead. I was going to say, yeah. If you want to,
So Jason, this is a fascinating thing that you bring up, and you know, with some of the work that we are doing at the Data Economics Company, as well as a number of the sessions at the festival, we are talking about this concept of a personal data asset portfolio of, you know, basically what if you start looking at data, as you said, being packaged up and, you know, quote unquote assetized into something that is useful and valuable, that has utility and value, then what kind of markets can develop where, you know, such data can be traded, exchanged, or otherwise utilized to unlock real world value. Like, you know, today we are seeing with stuff that's underlined with cryptocurrencies or utility tokens, NFTs, whatever you will, but there is a very strong case to be made to the point that you were making, that whether it's building data or other types of personal data that clearly have market utility, how can that be packaged up, traded, and how can that credit flow back to those who are producing?
I think I can add that a little bit to that. So, you know, blockchain as a data science sort of gives you a way to have a non-custodial method of moving things around, right? And to re-say that again, let's maybe use an example, your dishwasher and its time of use, you know, it's either not using energy at expensive times or not. Maybe that's worth a secondary credit on top of the power you save. If it's making water smart decisions, or if the homeowner is selecting low water mode versus high power mode, then there's a behavioral decision. But either way, at the end of the day, what's the digital data that can be derivatized, right? You make up a word on the spot here.
Exactly.
And that's the fresh water gallon, right? So if we have a way to say this fresh water gallon saved, we proved the fresh water gallon was saved. And if it's non-custodial, that means if I have the token that represents this digital fresh water gallon, if my dishwasher is putting out one of these a day, suddenly I'll have a wallet of, you know, one fresh water gallon token per day. And the bearer bond nature, the bearer token nature of just having the fresh water gallons is enough. So that is what allows you to start moving the digital assets.
Right.
And then in terms of making derivatives contracts based on what you have, you've got a second layer comes above that. Did that get closer to your question?
And, you know,
there?
and that leads me to the specific question I wanted to ask you, which I think you've already answered in Pat. And I asked this question in one of our panels yesterday to a kind of data philosopher / social scientist from York University. And he had a very fascinating answer. So I want to just ask you that question also and see what you have to say, which is, how do you think about the boundary between data privacy and data utility? where, what are the rights that the data producer needs to have over the control of how their data gets utilized, how they get compensated, and at the same time have the ability to say, no, like this domain of my data is not to be utilized by anyone, whereas this domain can be, and then I get to slice them up, and then I get to decide whether or how I want to sell or receive value for them. So where do you think that boundary lies, and how do you deal with sort of let's leave the technology aside for a second, because to your point, we are rapidly getting to a point where this kinds of technology are scalable. How do you think about just the ecosystem of, like, especially given the domain you're in, which is housing data, which is houses are such a personal and such a fundamentally a fundamental thing to pretty much people and families, and the data attached to that, has a certain amount of value. How do you get people to realize that? How do you get people to understand the importance of protecting that? And then how do you get them to understand the importance of utilizing that?
Data utility versus data privacy, huh? So I'm on the fence that you should get to own the facts about yourself, and you should get to choose some level of rights of whether some of these facts are tracked or not. But there are a variety of ethical layers in here that are worthy of discussion, right? So in the Energy Star space, by and large, most programs are set up in sort of a retail nature. As a homeowner, you get a data set collected about your audit, your home's current state. The energy audit kind of validates your obsolescence of certain ways. And then a work scope is proposed to you, and you either do it or you don't. And if you do, then a bunch of trades traipse through your house, and at the end of the month, another inspector comes in and inspects all the stuff that got done to see if the work scope was done to spec. And if it's, this is actually mirroring in the healthcare space, right? Your doctor figures out what's wrong with you, suggests you talk to specialists, gives you a course of action, and then eventually somebody pays the bills and doesn't pay enough, so it has to get billed again. And the same thing happens in the energy industry on this rebate front. And then there's this other sort of sister industry in the home performance space where utility programs, the Department of Energy, and other municipalities actually put money into low-income programs that pay for the work in energy assistance clients. There's a variety of reasons of why to do that, but the gist is we are very sensitive to the data about the homeowner, and we ask them to sign forms up front. We ask them to do the work in their house. We ask them to be able to collect this information. And so, data privacy is such that you can simply suggest to the homeowner, these things exist. Do you want to opt in? There's a spot in workflow that exists, at least in the construction industry, to like opt into this. In terms of some of the ethical boundaries, most of the programs, either low income, moderate income, or retail based, typically don't encumber environmental attributes like in a solar system. When you do a solar system, everyone talks about the SRECs. And if you don't know what the SRECs are, you need to learn, because it's a secondary source of income for solar systems that sort of gets billions of dollars of capital creatively getting in front of solar systems. Like, you can spend less on your solar systems cost up front because you can pre-sell these RECs. So the fact that we have no corollary in the healthy housing or the energy efficiency housing space is a problem, right? So there's already a lack of imagination in the construction industry because there aren't some of these REC certificates to pivot around. Well, let's say they did exist. Okay, let's say energy efficiency credits did exist, broadly speaking. Then you may have a program like a low income program in Maryland that's going to give you $10,000, $20,000 to fix all kinds of stuff in your house. Perhaps they are still doing the same thing, but they're encumbering your RECs, right? Like they don't ask. They don't ask now because there isn't anything to ask for. But this is a space where suddenly your privacy and your data utility start overlapping, in as much as more money can be put into these programs. if there is a rec that can come out and can be given to a polluter, given to a CSR office, of a Fortune 500 company and so forth, to prove social responsibility, to prove social injustice, to prove the odds and ends of fortified home improvements, vis-a-vis efficiency improvements, vis-a-vis healthy home improvements, vis-a-vis net zero energy, net zero water, net zero carbon ambitions that they have. And so coming back to utility and privacy concern, we're trying to say that just because the utility program paid some auditor to come and collect information about your house doesn't mean that the utility company owns the dimensions about your dining room. So SIRTAJ, we come to your house and do an energy audit, and we find out your dining room's 17 by 13 feet. And is that your fact to sell, or is that the utility's fact to sell? And even as silly as that data is, that you have a dining room, that's important to a variety of advertisers. You got a room that has no carpet, that's also important. That's local retailers important. Vis-a-vis everything in your house has an entire supply chain, huge sort of marketplace around everything from your windows and doors and appliances to the things behind the walls that you can't see. And in the new construction of how you even propose to build a house that hasn't been built yet, right? And what factors are there, or how much more efficient or healthy or sustainable that building would be if it was pivoted a little bit, right, to do that. But anyway, to answer your question, I am a pretty strong proponent of bills of rights for data privacy for citizens. I like what Europe did with GDPR. The ability to have your data transferable is critical for a lot of what we're suggesting can happen in housing, because right now that file is really locked away. It's not reformatted into something that the homeowner can move or manipulate, or that a contractor can move on behalf of the homeowner. If I come to you and find 4,000 data points about your house, typically you trust your doctor to load it into a system for you, and not to think that they're going to somehow sell it without your knowledge. But I think that the point is all of this needs network and methodology, and then you can start making line item by line item data points themselves a digital asset. Otherwise, again, the digital assets won't exist. So we're excited about how real world people that collect a ton of data already, and how real world homeowners who don't have access to the right capital types. Again, if you can get philanthropic money or credit money to pay for your project versus you take a loan out, or you spend your own savings on the project, we start inverting how many projects can happen in housing at large. And so there's a reason to try and balance privacy and utility, and to make sure that as data is collected, that there is some level of policing or expectations of those that help you propagate it to delete it after they're done with it. If you're getting paid money to handle someone's values, you charge a fair fee, you prove you deleted it, and your service is finished. And that's very well mapped out in the healthcare space. And so we see a lot of this mapping that can happen with privacy standards right into the housing space, and done so in a way that doesn't make the thing inefficient. In fact, it actually makes it more efficient when we kind of get into the depths there. Anyway, I think I talked all around your question. Maybe we'll let Nathan go, and I'll
No, I
tidy
think
up a better
it's fantastic and very, very comprehensive response. Thank you. SIRTAJ, I'll hand it back to you.
Hey, yeah, really appreciate the response. Nathan, I want to go over to you. I want to there's a couple of things even I want to pull out from what Jason said, and maybe ask you to comment on. But if you remember my original question that when we went down this list, what are some of the inherent risks that we could look to offset? I know you have a lot of background in healthcare, and I think that's a very and you kind of mentioned it as well in the presentation earlier. But I'd like to hear from you about what are some of the inherent risks that we could see there. The other thing that Jason kind of that pointed out that I think I'd also like to hear from you about is he mentioned that selling off like in a solar panel system, right? Like people sell their future credits, right, to help finance that, right? I'd love to hear your thoughts about doing that in, say, like the healthcare space as well.
All right, so I think that the healthcare space is very advanced as far as data privacy, data usage, and if you ever look at your personal health records, you see tremendous amounts of data ranging from doctors, notes to blood pressure and cholesterol, others data points. And so obviously there is that as a development in the area that there isn't in the other areas, and like what Jason mentioned as far as housing, within technology and other areas, but of course, for healthcare, that is the most personal data of all. And so if you want to sell that or list it or trade it, it's different risks as far as everything from blood test results down to genetic factors. I have a genetic disease, and so it's like they want to sell the rights to my DNA, and that's a favorite person. And I think that for every person, they need to have a lot of control, especially over healthcare data, to decide, okay, I'm going to sell my assay cholesterol results, but I don't want to sell my DNA test results. So definitely to allow folks to have maximum control and privacy over healthcare data most of all. Also, that data also, as it is personal, ought to have a higher value attached to it as well. I wouldn't sell my healthcare data for $5, you know?
I got some stuff to add to that there, if you wouldn't mind. A healthcare connection, and then coming back to this Wikipedia level of derivatives definition. A derivative is something that derives its value from the performance of an underlying entity.
Right.
It derives value from the performance of an underlying entity. If that's your human body or your spirit, yeah, it should matter. And anyway, in the housing sector, we've also got some interesting healthcare examples. I mentioned the slip and fall accident portfolio, an aging in place situation that is a massive industry that actually needs assistance. We've also got tons of studies that have proven how many ER visits can be avoided by asthma patients if you remove the pollution in their house, or you remove the lead from your yard, that was yeah, and or you install better filters and you reduce the particles in the air from parts per thousand to parts per million. But every ER visit you avoid is $7,000 to $10,000 for it, and you start 3, 4, 5, 8 of those. Suddenly you start eclipsing energy efficiency as a resource thousands of fold, right?
Uh-huh.
And it's how do you collect those in a portfolio? How do you, just because you screwed the railing that was loose into one grandma's house, it's hard to measure her impact. It's hard to measure the slips that she doesn't have. But if you do that across enough houses, then you've got statistics. Then you've got much more measurable stuff, right? But anyway, the performance of an entity and the performance of an asset is perhaps what is the biggest thing changing in the new decade here. The derivatives have historically been built off of pieces of paper people, have, in a pit somewhere, vis-a-vis these other esoteric things, your health, your house's performance, the dollars per square foot your house produces, right? If you've got a validated data set in a project or two that's been proven and is full of credit types that last for the duration of that house, your house is a 200-year asset, right? If it's a new house, it's going to be there long after we're all dead, and so the value that persists is maybe something that our generation should take a bit more to heed, because cryptocurrencies are going to be gone after we're gone, just like the houses will be here after we're gone. And so the thought again that we can boil that down into useful metrics today, that the performance of your asset, whether that's your house, which is most people's biggest asset, vis-a-vis your health, which people don't see as an asset until it's gone. A lot to change.
For sure. And health is your largest asset, and quite also your largest data asset as well.
Yeah.
Hey guys, there are a couple more questions from the audience that I'd like to, let's see if we can get to. I'm gonna jump out. We have about 5 minutes left for our slotted time, and I think there was one in here that points to something as well that came up earlier. And then we may have answered this a little bit as well, but I'll put it out to you guys. So what are the steps needed to get data derivatives to the market, right? We've talked a lot about like, hey, what we can do with them, but what do you guys see as the steps? I'll open this up to Jason, ARKA, and Nathan, whoever wants.
I think Nathan had a really interesting slide in his presentation that I don't know if he can bring up or show. So SIRTAJ, I know we have an internal version, but I think that had those things that we need to do to get to make these data-backed derivatives, data economic derivatives a reality. And I think that if we can bring up that slide, I would just redirect that question to Nathan and then Jason and maybe SIRTAJ, even back to yourself, as we look through that list, there's a lot there. And that's a lot of stakeholders, a lot of steps over a long period of time. So I would love to hear from Nathan and the others. What do you think the priorities are and kind of the ordering of events are in terms of actually making this a reality? So maybe we can start with Nathan there.
All right, so as I said, here, standardization is essential. Remember, standardization is having a uniform context, a uniform derivative context, because standardizing the actual structure of the derivatives helps with trading, it helps with the secondary market, it helps with sending facets of facilitating your data. And so standardization has to be the first the first element of making data derivatives popular and commonplace for sure. And then all the others have flow from there.
Jason, did you have any thoughts on the ordering of events or which stakeholders need to be approached in parallel, and maybe in terms of some of the work that you guys are doing?
Yeah, I think we'll unpack sort of the depths of our work more on Friday with who we're approaching. The question on mechanics and valuation of what the next steps are is, we could do another whole hour on that.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, sure. I think that maybe some of the usages might help, hedging or mitigating risk, exposure to assets that are not possible to otherwise trade, gearing, leverage such that a small movement in an asset price has a big movement in the derivative price, switching assets without disturbing the underlying assets, so swaps and this kind of stuff. To make any of that work, you need to sort of have industrial pillar to industrial pillar dialogues. How do you get the healthcare insurance industry at large talking to the energy efficiency space? Like, these are not easy dialogues to facilitate. And so some of it is, what's the next step, SIRTAJ? Just doing one, right? I mean, not even in a big way, just like, the challenge is, explaining this invisible stuff that doesn't exist yet versus just having something visible to show, hey, look, healthcare industry, here's someone who did it with, $10,000 worth of $100 credits. Can you replicate this, or can you now 10x, 100x, 1000x this, right? So I think that's where we're at. Yeah, that's where we're at, is these small proofs, and then which is becoming visible between industrial pillars, and then you can start wrapping fund derivatives, contracts upon whatever your sort of first pipeline might have been.
This case scenario that helps a lot. This is a model security, a model process of how this actually happens. And this let's start trading. And a lot of knowledge will come just from letting it trade. But at first example, at first model, they're active, for sure. As a look at the history of other businesses, it started the same way. There are options, futures that started small, but had a narrow use case, and that they blossomed to more. So that makes a lot of sense and fits in with the history of other businesses as well.
Well, guys, hey, I just want to say thank you. We're at time for the second, and I don't want to keep you guys any longer. There are actually still several open questions from the Q&A. I have other things that I kind of have written down as well. I have these pre-recorded things from our colleagues Vipin and Viren as well that we didn't get to today. But there's a couple of things that I'll read off from the Q&A. People submitted comments. Hey, this is an awesome panel. Thank you to all the panelists. I'm learning a lot. And then also there's just a point about, I think your audience would be happy to sit through several hours of workshop discussing the mechanics of how these things would work. I just want to say, I would like to, since I mentioned at the start, I would like to just broadcast the material I got, that I pre-recorded with Vipin and Viren. So I'm going to go to that. But it's about they're about 10 to 12 minutes each of those, and so I'm going to go into that. But before I do that, I just want to say thank you one more time to to the panelists. Really appreciate you guys joining us for the Data Economics Festival. I know Nathan and Jason, you guys both have a couple more, at least one more panel or section that you guys will be joining us for, and looking forward to those as well. So hey guys, thank you very much. You guys are welcome to stay on, or welcome to anything. I'm gonna just I'm gonna kick off these recordings. If you guys have any other closing comments or any other comments right now, feel free.
No, appreciate the opportunity. Thank you all for the time. Look forward to seeing you again on Friday, and I'm gonna go sign off, and look forward to sort of seeing the remix when it gets posted here.
Thanks everyone, and I'll see you Friday.
All right, awesome. Okay.
Nice to meet you, Jason. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. This was such a
you.
pleasure, Jason. It was a pleasure, Nathan. As always, a pleasure, and look forward to the next conversations and to the sessions that both of you are in.
Cheers. Thanks.
SIRTAJ, are we gonna cut to the?
Yeah, I'm bringing it up right now. So just
Okay,
give me a second. This is my conversation that I had with Viren. So sorry, this is my conversation that I had with Vipin. So I'm going to cut over to the audio for that one. And he's going to, well, you guys will see. Let's see if I, oops, had an issue with sharing. All right, let's get started. Hey Vipin, thanks for taking the time to talk to us a little bit about opportunities for data-backed derivatives, data-backed derivative products in the industrials and capital goods vertical. How about you just introduce yourself, and then let's get right into it.
Sure. Thanks, SIRTAJ. Thanks for this opportunity. So my name is Vipin, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Viren Chemicals, a clean technology company in the battery recycling space. Prior to starting Viren, I used to trade commodities in metals and energy space. So I was introduced to the field of, I was introduced to Lydian and the field of data economics a few months back. And since then, I have been fascinated by this whole, the amount and the work that has been done by yourself and the rest of the team has been nothing short of just phenomenal. With my background in the industrials and capital goods sector, I thought it would be a good idea to discuss the utilization of derivative of data-backed products as they can be used in the industrials and capital goods sector. So let us go into that. The companies that operate in the industrials and capital goods sector account for about 25% of the global GDP and employment, which is huge. On the flip side, they also account for about 30% of the global greenhouse gas emissions, which is not that good. Just by the virtue of these companies producing this ton of products, right? They generate and collect massive amounts of digital data from their processes and operations. You can imagine just the amount of steel being produced every year, to cement being produced, to the amount of plastics being produced, your toys, your apparels, your cars, and the amount of data that is being collected and generated at each and every step of those operations and processes. So the state of the art, or you want to say the landscape as it pertains today, right? In any product class, each company is essentially valued on the actual product cost curve. Like if I can produce a product for X dollars, and if you can produce for X minus delta dollars, then the likelihood of you getting the business is significantly higher, right? Now, as we are moving forward with the whole digital economies, and people are trying to value data, trying to value the intangibles around businesses, right? My belief system is that the data will become more valuable than the physical product itself. And it will result in the top value creators gaining a competitive edge just by leveraging the amount of data that they have and leveraging it correctly, right? So So let's get into a use case wherein we have a metal producer. Say for example, somebody is producing aluminium, one of the most used metals. They are used in your cars, they're used in your beer cans, right? You just name it. It is also one of the most polluting production processes as well, because it is extremely energy intensive. So now let's consider a metal producer who is using a cleaner technology for the production of its metal. For now, a metric ton of aluminum, irrespective of how it is produced, it'll let you price the same. Now, if you are that producer, you're always facing that question, hey, I'm using a better technology. I'm having better ESG credentials. I should be getting a premium for this metal that I'm producing. And if somebody is willing to give that premium, how much that premium should be? It's always that whole pricing question that is in picture, right? We don't have any framework or any systems or technology that is available today which can help solve these problems. I'll come back to my fascination with this whole data economics. If you bring in the concept of data economics and this whole networks around data economics, if you can start creating these networks of economies, you can actually create this data-backed derivative products, which can answer these above questions beautifully, right? Imagine if this producer is able to convey this amount of data that is being collected with them to a prospective buyer in a manner in which you have a trust. This data is not changeable by any third party. It is auditable, right? So the idea that a data economic network can actually encapsulate this data can range from the production data, like what is your input energy basket? Is your power being sourced from coal, natural gas, hydro, solar, wind, right? What is the kind of technology being utilized? Are you being compliant? Do you have any child labor at your facilities? So on and so forth, right? Well, I mean, you can even continue to encapsulate the pollution control measures that a particular plant is having, right? So you will always be able to find a willing buyer once he is able to trust your production processes, your compliance processes, so on and so forth. So say, for example, very recently, BMW announced that it will source in aluminum, which has been manufactured by solar power, which is huge. A major car company now saying that it's not going to source aluminum, which is being produced by coal-fired electricity, for example, right? Okay, so now you have found a willing buyer. How do you get a premium for? How do you price that premium from their willing buyer, right? So here you can then bring in the traditional investment banks, for example, the whole financial industry that exists for risk pricing, risk mitigation, for example. So you can have this willing buyer and our producer in question execute a very simple over-the-counter product. Over-the-counter deals can be done, single party, bi-party, whatever. And if I really want to turn it into an utopia based on data economic networks, I can envision a futures contract being traded on a commodity exchange, which is essentially backed by data. So if you can think about, you have a futures contract, which is data-backed derivatives product, a very, very classical definition of a financial derivative product backed by data that is derived from production processes, real world actions, right? So, so now you have created this product. This product has value. This product can trade, awesome. But you know what? The moment you start creating these kind of products, it can also unlock a huge amount of untapped value. Think about this. You're this metal producer. You have a way to go out and market yourself. Hey, I produce this metal in a much more cleaner manner, right? So you can expand your customer base. Think about, you can actually make additional P&L by selling offsets for climate. Like Tesla has been doing it for such a long time. You can have access to better and cheaper financing, so on and so forth. I mean, a bunch of these options open up for this particular company, right? And this will draw up competition. If you have willing buyers on a commodity exchange willing to give you a premium for a cleaner produced metal, you will see that the animal spirits in the capitalistic world take over, and they will start moving towards clean technology, right? So rather than just giving subsidies for cleaner technology, sustainability, you can actually drive market-based solutions to have the world move towards more sustainable production methods. This is what I had, just a very brief sort of introduction to sort of data-backed derivative products that can be utilized in the industrial sector. Happy to take any questions that you might have, SIRTAJ.
Hey, just a couple of things. You know, like establishing like the framework. Like I think the case for this is clear if we can get there. But you mentioned there's the framework, and you know, what does that framework look like, or maybe better yet, what are the first couple of pieces that you see that kind of like go into establishing the framework? So because like, you know, an over-the-counter deal is not going to happen, or a futures contract is not going to happen overnight, right? What is the, you know, what is the infrastructure? What is the foundation that you think is needed to get to that point? You know, which then, like you said, opens up so many more possibilities.
Sure. So think about this. If you can have an infrastructure where you are able to like digitally map the whole value chain, just for the starters, right? So for example, this metal producer is going to buy the raw feed for its production from somewhere, right? If this metal producer has to claim, hey, I'm clean, green, I'm complying by all the rules, now this metal producer has to deal with its own suppliers, its own production processes, the shippers in between for the actual raw material feed, and then shipping of the finished product from their facility to the buyer's facility, right? So step number one is, how can you create a data economic network by digitally mapping the value chain? Once you have this digitally mapped value chain and you have these interacting stakeholders in this value chain, then you can start defining the market rules. And that's where you can start defining these futures contract. You can start defining this over the counter contracts, so on and so forth. So,
hey, very cool, very excited. Hey Vipin, you know, I don't want to keep you for too much longer. So, you know, thanks so much for your time. You know, and just to talk about this, sharing your knowledge in the space. And you know, as you mentioned, you know, we've been partnering for a while, and you know, I'm really excited to see where this goes and where we're able to develop this. So
cool.
Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks. Bye.
All right. Hey, that was from Vipin TYAGI. ARKA or Nathan, you guys have any comments? Otherwise, I'm going to start bringing up the one. There was another session that I recorded with our other colleague, Viren, on the potential for data-backed derivatives, data economic derivatives in the healthcare space.
No, I think we should go right into it. I just wanted to, just one comment is, it was interesting to see how similar Vipin's trajectory was in terms of development of a derivative product in the industrial space, as what Jason was talking about earlier, in terms of, you know, what he is doing in the sustainable building space.
All right, cool. All right, let's see. I'm bringing this one up. Got it. Here we go. Hey, Viren, thanks for taking the time to talk to us today about the opportunities for data-backed derivatives in health sciences. So, hey, maybe you can just introduce yourself a little bit, and then let's get right into it.
Great. Thank you, SIRTAJ. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to all of you. I appreciate it. I'm sorry I couldn't join live, so this is recorded, but it's great to have this opportunity. Thanks. You know, what you'd requested me to do was to talk about data derivatives in health sciences. I'll do that, but as you said, I'll just give you a quick background on myself. I actually have founded a firm called Hitchin-Rock Advisors. We're based in London, and I also spent an extended period of time in New York and in Singapore. What Hitchin-Rock Advisors does is basically consulting to biomedical companies, and in some instances to biomedical investors. We provide our specialist sector knowledge of the biomedical space, particularly for M&A deals, licensing deals, investment deals. Our sector expertise comes in. By way of background, I worked both in the investment banking industry with Citibank, with Standard Chartered, with Ambit Capital, with ICICI, and also with a few pharma and medical device companies. I worked with Pfizer for many years, with Novartis, with Alcon, and with Wockhardt. So these have all been M&A and business development roles. A few years ago, I founded Hitchin Advisors, like I said, to focus on providing this biomedical expertise that I've built to companies and investors trying to do such transactions. So that's my background briefly.
Hey, thanks. All right, let's talk about data derivatives in health sciences.
Great. Okay, so thank you. And this is one of my favorite subjects. So long before I met you, SIRTAJ, you know, I've been mulling over these things. So it was a pleasure to connect with you folks. So I've actually put together a few slides, and I'll just walk you through them. Hopefully, it'll be useful to your audience as well. So first of all, I just wanted to talk about what database-backed securities in health sciences, you know, what the scope of that is and what that's about. So first of all, just trying to size this a bit. If I think about all the public companies, all the listed companies in the life sciences, biopharma, medical devices, you know, tools, life sciences tools and diagnostic space across the world, I haven't seen a direct figure myself or someone make that estimate. But my guesstimate is that we're talking about a combined market cap of somewhere between $2 to $4 trillion. And I actually think the private companies, in terms of market, in terms of their imputed or implied market value, is actually much bigger than that. It's probably 3 to 6 trillion. So if you kind of add that together, we're talking about companies with a valuation or imputed valuation of somewhere between $5 to $10 trillion, $5 to $10 trillion. So that's a fairly large size. What these companies get valued for today is a fairly complex and opaque jumble of data. That data is all kinds of things. You know, it's all the way from the shape and structure of proteins and DNA and RNA to the preclinical data that comes out when you test on, let's say, on mice or monkeys, any product, to the clinical trials, which you've heard a lot about in the recent years, in the last year, you know, because of the COVID vaccines, to manufacturing capacities, again, something that's in the news these days. There's a lot of data about quality. There's a lot of data about epidemiology, sorry for the complex word, patient genomic profiles, you know, probability of technical success of getting a product out, you know, what's the ratio of success of regulatory approvals, data around reimbursements, you know, the actual real life performance of drugs or treatments, all of that. And then, of course, the usual that goes with any company in any industry, which is, you know, sales and marketing data, financial data, HR data, etc. And also macroeconomic factors and market liquidity. Usually, again, a lot to do with what happens with other companies, but there are peculiarities for the biomedical life sciences space. Just to give an example, biotech stocks are very high liquidity, are very liquidity driven, so they're high beta stocks. So if you put all of this together, there's a fairly complex and opaque jumble of data that goes into valuing these companies, as I said. And up until this point of time, I don't think there has been much interest, need, or even the possibility of sort of disaggregating all of this, of unbundling all of this data and looking at it separately. And what does that mean? It means that you have companies that are being valued using unbundled and opaque data, which, if you think about it for a moment, means that investors are taking unbundled and opaque risks. And that's the premise of why we, you know, why we think data-backed securities in health sciences will be what we will see in the coming years. So I'll just take a minute to pause here, SIRTAJ. Is that sort of any questions or thoughts on that, or should I just go ahead?
And no, I think that, hey, this is all sounds great. Let's keep going.
Okay, sure, thanks.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take an example of outcomes-based agreements. These are increasingly in vogue, or at least being talked about. And these are contracts that are signed between pharma companies or medical device companies, let's call them manufacturers, and health insurance companies on the other hand. And these contracts are really about saying that, look, the health insurance company will only pay the pharma company for its product if the product actually works in real life. So don't just sell me health insurer says, I'm not going to pay you these multi-million-dollar prices. I'll only pay you in bits and pieces. I'll monitor how the patient performs on your drug or treatment, and then pay you based on whether that drug succeeds or treatment succeeds or not. So these are still sort of relatively few and far between, surprisingly, and that's because health insurance companies find it very complex to create these kind of tailored agreements. But I think the pressure is emerging for both sides, for health insurers to create more such agreements, and pharma companies would, of course, love to do more of these because it helps them expand their market. So assuming that we have more and more of these agreements, and we can, these are pretty handy and easy to securitize, or these are almost the first and visible aspect of what can be securitized. If you sort of aggregate some of these, you take as with any financial contract that is securitized, you add up a few of them, and then you kind of break them into pieces, sell them to different investors. I'm not going to go into the details and mechanics of that, but let me just explain what would be different from how things are today, and how they would be tomorrow if these kind of things happen. First of all, as everybody knows, with new kinds of treatments, cell and gene therapy kind of treatments, you have price tags sort of going now into $1 to $2 million for some of the latest treatments. That's a constraint for patients, of course. It's very unaffordable, but it's also a constraint for manufacturers because obviously there aren't a lot of that many people who can afford those kind of prices, or health insurance companies who are willing to pay for those kind of prices. So that kind of constrains both the manufacturers and the patients. What is more, health insurers are actually acting as biotech venture capitalists in the process. They're probably not realizing it themselves. But what they're doing is they're sitting on all of these agreements that are risk-based, i.e. they are based on performance. That's the kind of thing a venture capitalist would like to see. But it's sort of within the sort of very bureaucratic structures of some of these health insurance companies, you're finding people who are running investment portfolios mimicking hedge funds or venture capitalists, and that's probably not what either their management wants or their investors want. I mean, the investors of health insurers want. So that's not ideal. And while they are, as health insurance companies, they like you insure your risk with an insurance company, the insurance company insures part of its risk with the reinsurer. So they are doing some of that, or rather a lot of that, but they're clearly not laying off specific risks of the kind that come with biomedical products. So in the end, what's really happening is health insurance companies do keep doctors and scientists on their payrolls, but unfortunately, what those people, those very knowledgeable people, those experts are doing is figuring out ways to control costs, meaning to not pay for medicines or treatments rather than helping patients. So that's how the situation is today. If and when we're able to securitize, we are able to sort of expand the number of outcomes-based agreements, and that can happen through securitizing them. Tomorrow, what we expect to see is that patients can, instead of sort of having to fork out $1 million or $2 million bucks, out of their pockets, it becomes like a home mortgage, let's say, and they can pay out over, let's say, 30 years or something. That helps patients. Manufacturers can expand their own markets because now more people can afford their treatments. Health insurers can actually now sell off their risk, not just to reinsurers, but to find other investors who are willing to buy some of these contracts, securitized contracts. Financial investment portfolios are no longer managed by some bureaucrat inside a health insurance company, but they're handed over to the people who know how to manage financial investments and portfolio managers who are knowledgeable about those things. And venture capitalists such as biotech venture capitalists or other kinds of investors, hedge funds, etc., can take the kind of risks that they want. For example, somebody may decide that he wants to take a risk on the performance of the drug, which the health insurance company does not want to take, let's say. And so it is possible for an investor to do that very specific thing. And the last point, which I think all of us will be very happy to hear, is that the scientists and doctors who are sitting inside the health insurance company are focused on helping patients, not sort of focused on depriving them of treatments. So that's what I haven't gone into the details, SIRTAJ, of how to securitize, etc., because that would be a completely different discussion. But I hope this kind of gives a little bit of flavor.
Yeah, no, I think that would be a much longer discussion as well. Especially if we were talking about like some of the challenges in doing these things. But yeah, I think it's very clear, like what the opportunity is here and the need and the type of impact that could be created, if we're as we move toward securitizing these types of agreements.
Great. So I have one more slide, SIRTAJ, where I kind of talk about how something like this can actually widen the appeal of biotech to a great number of investors. Remember, I started by saying that at the moment you don't have too many options. If you invest in a biotech company or a pharma company or a medical device company, you're investing into an opaque jumble of data and therefore an opaque jumble of risks. But if as this market evolves, and I'm sure it will, as we start securitizing some of these sort of data sets within those companies, and outcomes-based agreements being one such one such sort of data sets which are hopefully easier to securitize, you'll be able to find that you're able to access a bigger set of investors. So, for example, instead of everybody betting on everything, venture capitalists can take the kind of risk that they're most comfortable with, which is backing scientist innovator teams and the R&D process. Hedge funds can take on risks, like you have these event-driven hedge funds. They can take on the kind of risk that they're comfortable with. So, let's say they take the risk on whether a company will get a phase 2 approval when the FDA approval decision is tomorrow or next month or whatever. They can take such risks. Pension funds who've been facing this problem of longevity, as people's lifespans increase, they're on the hook to pay for pensions for longer and longer, and therefore they're more interested in biomedical treatments and their success. Let's say they can take on they can offset some of that liability by betting on great new treatments, which offset some of the risk that they're taking on the other side. Private equity firms need not take technology or early stage or R&D risk. They can simply take the risks about commercializing the product or the teams that they like to back, who are on commercialization excellence, let's say. And wealth management firms, who so far have only been recommending to their clients which stock to buy, or which bond to buy. They can also take some of these risks by giving loans to their high net worth customers. Let's say unfortunately somebody has a cancer, a diagnosis or something. They can take a risk on that because now they're able to take a risk purely on one particular aspect. So that's the kind of expansion of the investors, rather than these highly specialized biotech investors or medtech investors that you see these days. If and when we are able to successfully pick out all these data sets from these companies, convert them into contracts that are securitized, which is obviously something that we SIRTAJ, you and I have been talking a lot about. We'll be able to find newer kinds of investors, or we'll be able to find the more traditional conservative investors who kind of stayed off, rightly so, from biotech, because they're not able to judge all these risks, or their charters don't allow them to make such investments. Instead, we'll allow them to invest in only what they're comfortable with or what their charters allow. So, and then there may be others who are willing to take much more risks, but aren't interested in all the sort of the drag that comes from, let's say, commercial excellence or something like that. But they're more interested in R&D. We can securitize the risks in a manner that they only pick that particular one. So that's in summary what I had to say. Now there are many more complexities and many challenges and problems that which will come with things like this. But for the moment, let me just stop here and ask you, SIRTAJ, is that kind of around? Is that what you had in mind, or is there something?
Hey, Viren, yeah. I just have I have one question before we wrap things up. If what do you see as sort of if you were to just guess, like what does the roadmap for these types of things look like? I mean, it's likely to be some time before we're able to break it down into these 5 different pieces of risk, and each the right party being able to invest a little just exactly in the right area that they would like to. But in your mind, how do you see this kind of playing out? If you've given it any thought.
Well, that's a great question, SIRTAJ. Well, I have actually given it some thought. The main challenges are actually not technology or understanding of how to unbundle. That's difficult enough, or there are some complexities and nuances there. But that's not the hard part. The hard part is sort of more getting the healthcare ecosystem, the health insurance companies, the manufacturers, the patients, the regulators sort of aligned to something like this. And also sort of bringing on board the financial investors who, thus far have had no reason to look into the space because it just seems so cryptic and so difficult that they've had no reason to take a look at some of these. So one is sort of just putting a whole organizational framework in place to bring all of these various actors together. The second is to standardize documents, securities contracts, things like that, which will make it easier and sort of also bring in put things more in the language of investors as they understand them. So if you have a standard documentation or standard kind of contract, you could potentially put it on a futures exchange, for example. Those are the kind of things that investors understand better, and you could pull them in like that. So that's the second part. There is a third part, which is probably the hardest of the 3 to crack, which is that a lot of it. So there's a huge amount of, especially in the last decade or so, when there's been so much liquidity in the system. Most pension funds, endowments, hedge funds, private equity funds, venture funds, they have very, very large amounts of capital to invest. And they're often looking at large tickets to invest into. Fortunately, unfortunately, when they're searching for alpha in the biotech space, they may have to sort of be a little bit more nimble, or look at a slightly smaller ticket investments than what they're sort of traditionally used to, sort of doing multi-billion-dollar investment or something like that. Now, I'm not saying multi-billion-dollar is ruled out in the space. All I'm saying is that in general, everybody, all the categories of investors will have to look at somewhat smaller tickets to grasp these kind of opportunities. So yeah, so that's it. I'm confident all of these things are going to fall in place in the coming years. In the next 2 to 5 years, I see a lot of this sort of falling in place, and this becoming just like investing in anything else. I mean, it's just going to be a regular commonplace stuff. So I think think you and I are already moving in that direction, but I'm sure many others are as well.
Well, hey, I love that vision, and I hope we are able to get there. Hey, Viren, thanks so much for the time today. Just really looking forward to how these things develop. Continue to work on these things with you as well. And hey, appreciate you taking the time and sharing it with us all.
My pleasure, and thank you again, SIRTAJ, for thinking of me and for this important conversation. It's really it's great that we can have this, and hopefully we'll progress along this path as you just rightly said. Thank you so much.
All right, great, thanks.
SIRTAJ, you're muted again. Sorry.
Forgot to take myself off of mute. Hey guys, well, so that was a recording from Viren. I hope you guys enjoyed that. It's kind of fun seeing myself kind of laughing at myself. It's weird on to do that. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed that. You know what, we are like way over time and stuff. ARKA or Nathan, if you guys have any closing comments, happy to have you put in the last couple words.
Personally, I enjoy it for the next session on Friday.
Thank you, Nathan. It was a pleasure having you here. Thank you, SIRTAJ, for putting everything together. I thought we got a very comprehensive idea from Nathan on the fundamentals of data-backed derivatives, or data economic derivatives, as we call them, from a finance perspective. We got a great view of how it could be used for various sustainable building and related activities from Jason. And Vipin gave us a view into how data-backed derivatives could really energize the industrials space, and especially the metals industry. And then finally, Viren gave us a fascinating look into the vast opportunity around data economic derivatives in the health sciences space that remains to be tapped. And I feel like we could easily triple the amount of time that we've put in here. So thank you again for this lovely conversation. What a great start to the morning. And thank you everyone for participating in the Data Economic Festival. SIRTAJ, any other housekeeping items that we need to?
Nope, that's it. Thanks to everyone that attended the live session. This session, as well as all the other sessions from the Data Economics Festival, can be up on Lydian.com. I think they'll end up on YouTube as well, probably under the Data Economics Company's YouTube channel. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of the Data Economics Festival. There's a lot of other events coming up over the rest of the week. So thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.